Good mythical afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Ayala with another vlog for you. This is the American Revolution officially begins. This is, at the moment, Unit 5, Section 3. Please be, or 5.3. Please be aware the unit and section number may have changed. As always, please make sure that you're writing down your notes. You're listening to the information coming out so that you can be prepared for my test. So let's first up, let's talk about the British versus the Continental or the American Army. So the British has the strongest army and navy in the world. They've been fighting all over the whole world and, because of the 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War. They fought in the Caribbean, North America, South America, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and India. They also have more men and also more experience. So they look like they are really big heavy hitters. While the Americans, our advantages were a little bit different. First of all, we're fighting for our homes, which makes us have a bigger motivation. We know the land. We live here, so we definitely know, for example, if you're in the South, like around South Carolina, you're able to put people into traps, like accidentally make them fall into a swamp pit full of alligators or something. And we have better leadership. We had George Washington, Alexander Hamilton. Hey, even Benedict Arnold was a great leader at this time. So as we get through there, as anything in American history or for Americans in general, Americans are divided. About 20 to 30% are loyalists, or yay, I like the crown, I support the British. 40 to 45% are patriots, while the other 15 to 20% are neutral. They just are like, don't fight in my backyard, leave me alone. So, of course, this is also going to split Native American tribes and African Americans. The Native Americans are like, well, the British kind of stink, the colonists kind of stink, so I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And the African Americans don't know who to join, because the idea of joining the Americans, well, they might be re-enslaved. And then they join the British, well, they're the ones that enslaved me in the first place. So it makes very little sense for a lot of these different groups. So we start creating an army. So the general or commander of the Continental Army is a gentleman that you probably know by now. His name is George Washington. Later, he will become our first president of the United States and the only president to not have a political party. So it's formed by untrained militias, more or less just a whole bunch of people who live in the area are joining together, and they are getting together, creating this army. So this is like the random barber guy who lives on the street, some random lawyer, a banker, a couple of teachers. We bring our own little muskets and our rifles, and we get ready. We had no supplies. I mean, we literally lived in the middle of nowhere based on European standards. But we did have some awesome women who were more than willing to help us out. So we had a lot of wives who followed the camp and actually made sure that the men kept themselves clean, didn't get all gross, cooked, and would actually help make sure they didn't drink poopy and pee-pee water like what happened with Jamestown. I do apologize about that jump cut. But anyway, then we have these women known as Molly Pitchers. They brought water to the troops as they were fighting. One of the coolest and most interesting stories that there was this one Molly Pitcher who was actually giving water to the cannoneers. And as she took a step, it went in between her legs, through her dress, and blew up the guy behind her. And because, you know, she's an American woman, she's like, oh, no, you didn't just fire at me? Really? So she goes, come here, give me that cannon. And she more or less turns it around and starts shooting right back at the British. So kind of really tells you the type of women that we have in our society. Then we also had a lady named Deborah Simpson who dressed as a man and actually joined the army. This will happen quite often. Mostly because the Americans, we really didn't care who or what you were. We just needed people to fight and who were willing to lay down their lives. So now we're going to go to the middle states. So Britain had a whole bunch of armies and mercenaries in the area. Especially the Hessians, excuse me, from the German Principality of Hesse. So they're fighting all over New York. The Americans lost. They end up retreating to New Jersey. And because the conditions were so bad, Thomas Paine pens another pamphlet known as the American Crisis to bolster these troops' spirits. And because Washington knew that the morale was so low that he decides on December 25th of 1777, he crosses the Delaware into New Jersey and attacks the Hessians in the middle of the night on Christmas Eve into Christmas Day. And this works because everyone at that time did not fight at night. They did not fight in the winter. They did not fight on holidays. And the Americans are like, you know what? Forget about that. I'm actually going to fight because this is the best time to do so. The Hessians are drunk. They're passed out. They're like, yay! Merry Christmas and all that stuff. And Washington's like, well, yeah, Merry Christmas. Now you're under our control and now you're going to prison. So Britain has a grand strategy. So they want to cut off the New England colonies from the rest of the colonies at the Hudson River Valley. So right where this green line is. And really the idea of this was because they wanted to do, as we call, cut the head of the snake. The majority of the rebels or the patriots lived in the New England colony. So if you separate them from the other ones, it makes life a little bit easier for the British because maybe you can separate those who are pro-patriot from those who are more loyal or neutral to try to control or contain the issue. Contain this. So in September of 1777, Britain ends up seizing our de facto capital at Philadelphia, and morale is even lower. So what ends up happening, meanwhile, along the Mohawk River Valley up in New York, Britain makes allies with the Mohawks of the Iroquois, and their leader is a guy named Joseph Brant. So we send over one of our best lieutenant generals. His name was Benedict Arnold. He is not a traitor yet, if you're asking. And he leads a small army into the area. And what he does is absolutely genius. So what he does, he captures some. He sends some allied Native Americans, and he also sends some captured loyalists to tell the British that the Americans had this huge army on the way. And what happens is this actually works. Because when these Native Americans get there, they're like, we heard that the Americans are bringing this huge army to take you, and they're going to wipe the floor with you. So they give up. And here comes Arnold walking into this big old fort with this little tiny amount of people going, ha ha, fooled you, my ruse works, losers. So then we get to the battles of Saratoga, which is the turning point of this war. And because after these multiple battles, the Americans begin to turn the tide. Prior to this, we were getting our butt whooped everywhere. So what happens is helps to persuade King Louis XVI of France to join us. Because remember, he still wants revenge on the British because of the French and Indian War. I mean, he's like, you hate the British American colonists, I hate the British, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And yes, he does look like he's wearing a glorified window curtain. So, in your notes, a good idea is to write this down. So what, in your opinion, was the most important advantage or disadvantage that the British and Americans had? So that means give me one advantage for the disadvantage for the Americans. Give me one advantage or disadvantage for the British. And then tell me why. Because I bet you're going to need this later. And as always, don't forget to be awesome.